Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? My name is Craig Otto. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and today we're going to do a follow-up from the first video I showed on white belt training. I've made a follow-up a huge part of my standard practice, not just for training, but in everything that I do. I find that follow-up really enhances personal integrity, so it's very important. If you haven't seen part one of my series, be sure on white belt training, be sure to check it out. Obviously, this follow-up video may not make sense if you haven't seen the first part, but I'll try to make it, valuable for you whether you saw the first video or not. So in part one, I asked you to observe your business for a week. And I asked that you observe the behaviors of the culture from the bottom of the organization all the way to the top. And I hope you also considered your own behaviors as well. Sometimes we tend to behave like the culture around us, that we're in it, and we don't even realize we may be behaving a certain way. So that was our homework, and I'm not going to go through every observation, but humility is a strong principle in culture that when it comes to exhibiting excellence, and it shows the culture is able to observe and assess gaps and create improvements and sort of learn continuously. It's a never-ending cycle of seeking perfection, and that's what you may see in your operation. Those are behaviors and principles and laws of excellence. And I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see some cancer within your organization. Every operation typically has a little bit of cancer, right? Criticizing, complaining, comparing, those types of things. But the real question is, did you yourself have any cancerous behaviors? In all of this, as I said in part one, it's a personal transformation. So the solution to all of this, regardless of what you've seen in your operation, is to focus on what is within your control and what is within your influence. And that is your choices and your individual behaviors. And it is your role to be a model for those choices and a leader for those behaviors. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So in part one, I introduced the Otto model. As I've said before, I call it that because if it's wrong, I'm going to take the blame for it. So it's time to put the model to work and provide some application for you. And you'll learn more applications as we go through these different parts. But in terms of follow-up, I want you as a new white belt, or even if you had a higher level of training, I want you to understand this model and how it works. So it's time to learn how to anchor our decisions to the guiding principles. All right. So let's begin with talking about the choice diamond and how it's anchored into the guiding principles. So you can see, again, the guiding principles are at the bottom here, and it's represented by the stone, right? We're anchoring ourselves into that stone, those natural laws, those moral laws, those laws of excellence. That's why the orange diamond is kind of inside of that stone. We're anchored into it, right into those guiding principles, so that we are directed by those laws. And so again, it starts with the personal transformation. So off to the right side of the diamond, you're going to see some of my key points here that I'm filling in. So just kind of pay attention to that area of the model. As always, like I said, we begin by transforming ourselves first. And while this may seem rudimentary and that it goes without saying, choosing the laws of excellence is the most important thing. It's not always easy choosing those laws, though, because sometimes they're not intuitive. And we'll talk specifically about the laws of excellence. So the first law of excellence is quality at the source. And it's it's fundamental, because if you can't make a product or service consistently with quality, you're not going to be able to get very far. A lot of lean starts with standardizing, and it's for that reason. It's to get that product consistently out with quality. The next one, pooling and flowing value, and that's about eliminating waste and flow stoppers by using things called lean tools. And these tools themselves are truly what anchor you to the guiding principles. You may ask, like, how do I choose these principles? Well, that's what I'm going to train you on is these tools. And we'll speak specifically how to pool and flow value in the next training sessions. And, another thing, one-piece flow. One-piece flow is a law that almost every production person I've ever met, they really struggle with this. And there's many reasons for that. And the main reason being that it makes production operation very vulnerable to problems. And if those problems aren't addressed, I can't blame them for not wanting to do one-piece flow. However, it has been proven time and time again that doing one thing at a time with excellence is the most productive way for overall operations. We, probably won't go too deep into one-piece flow in the white belt training. However, it's definitely something we will hit hard in yellow belt training. The next one is the process and distance reduction. One of the principles I assure you we will spend a great deal of time on with white belt training is looking at process waste. And more specifically, we're going to spend a great deal of time on learning how to reduce distance in our processes, which reduces wasted time overall. Okay, so it's a very important piece to all of this. And lastly, I want to make it clear that anchoring yourself to the principles is as simple or difficult as using the lean systems and tools. And in addition, it's about truly believing and trusting in these systems and tools to get the results. In other words, you get out of the tools what you put into them. So if you don't trust in the tools and you don't use them correctly, they will fail. And if you do trust in the tools, you will see their true power in an abundant, synergistic outcome or result. Very, very powerful. So, once you've made a choice to anchor to the guiding principles, right, through those tools and systems, the next phase is to allow your choices to change your behaviors. All right, so individual behavior becomes the focus point now that you've anchored your choices to the laws or the principles, those guiding principles. And so again, this is a personal transformation. Okay, so now we're watching off to the right side here on my key points. The first, I'll say, individual behavior that you must exhibit by anchoring your choices to these laws is to respect every individual. And so, what that means from a behavioral standpoint is that your interactions with people are extremely important. It doesn't mean you have to agree with people, but you must be respectful in how you work with them. The next thing will become difficult the more you learn and transform yourself. Okay? It's going to become more difficult as you learn. It will also be difficult if you've had a lot of experience already in your job. Okay? And that is leading with humility. So let me talk specifically about leading with humility. The challenge is to look at everything through a lens of consequences. Okay, consequences are not experience. Consequences are things that occur because of the laws. So, for example, when you drop something, the consequence is the law of gravity pulls it to the ground. Right. Another example: when you commit to take an action for someone and then you fail to meet that commitment, The consequence is the lost trust due to the moral law of integrity, right? So not all consequences are immediate, which is why you must really focus on understanding the consequences of all your behaviors. The main point is to not trust your experience. And I know that sounds crazy, but you should take it under consideration with caution, okay? Focus on understanding whether your experiences truly reflect the consequences of the law, or if perhaps the consequence was delayed, giving the experience a false impression or false results. So, as an example, let's say your operation is performing lean events for many years, right? Kaizen events. And you're looking as the manager, maybe you're new to the program, you're coming in looking at things, and you decide that it would be better for the overall costs to cut that program, cut the lean events out. We're going to stop doing them. And, the diminishing returns, right? So we've been doing this for so long, we have all the low-hanging fruit that's been collected, so it's not necessary to perform these lean events anymore, right? So this is your basis for the decision. You feel like you're not getting much out of these events. So initially, the cost of the business will go down, and it'll appear that eliminating the lean events would create a positive business impact, right? Because we're not putting money, we're not spending hours and time on the lean events, we're not spending dollars towards the changes that come from the lean events, right? So it's a true cost reduction, and you'll see that in the business results. And it creates an experience, right? We talk about consequence and experience. It creates experience, which gives a false lesson learned. See, eventually, the law of excellence will take over, and the business performance will degrade over time. So let's say a year or two later, the business starts suffering, right? And you may not realize it. You may not even know that it's because you're not doing those lean events anymore, right? But, obviously from your experience in the past, it said it was the right thing to do, right? You've seen that cost reduction. So you may not even tie the fact that you cut out the lean events to your poor business performance 1 or 2 years later. So, one of the things that you need to recognize is that the laws always win in the end. And whether you recognize it or not, the consequences will always begin to show up. And your experience may end up being wrong. So, next thing I want to talk about is practicing diligent follow-up. And with diligent follow-up, that's very important to all of this. And that's one of the reasons that I'm doing this video. It's follow-up to the first training session, right? And here we see why. It's good individual behavior. So in review, we need to respect every individual. We need to lead with humility by understanding consequences. And again, here we see that we need to be diligent with our follow-up. So if you tell people you're going to do something, then do it and make sure it stays done. Many times as a white belt, there will be other parties in the operation that make commitments as part of your continuous improvement program. It is your job to hold them accountable and to follow up relentlessly to ensure that the actions that we're committed towards those promises are happening. And this will create personal integrity for you as well as organizational integrity. All right, and lastly, always be transparent with your thoughts and actions. People are typically suspicious when it comes to operational excellence, and for good reason. Many times organizations attempt to implement operational excellence and do it incorrectly, right? And that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So people see such efforts as like programs of the month, and or maybe it's something that was attempted in the past, it failed, so they don't even consider it. And again, it's that false experience that's making people go against these guiding principles. And one last comment, I wrote a book called The Principle Grinder, and it goes into detail about the importance of humility. And I think it goes right along with this message and of follow-up. I think it's important and highly recommend it to help you on your personal transformation. So this concludes the follow-up to part 1 of our training. I hope you have a deeper understanding for why operational excellence is so important and the role that culture plays into it. See, culture transformation requires the entire organization to begin anchoring their choices into those principles of excellence. And once individuals begin and trust or believe and trust in these principles, then their behaviors will also start to change. And that leading the operation then to a full culture transformation towards achieving excellence. And I'm really excited to share part 2 of the training. It'll be about learning to identify the types of processes that hinder operational excellence. And once you learn to identify those things, I'll start to share tools and systems to help you eliminate these hindering steps within your processes. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Hopefully you guys was able to do the homework of part 1, and hopefully this is kind of helping you think through sort of your next steps. And I appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Like my videos, subscribe to my channel. And don't be afraid to leave questions, comments, or suggestions. Hey, until next time, God bless. Thank you.